Hi, this is Cheryl from Majestic Wire Artworks. Today we're going to make a version of this woven curl necklace, and I'm going to make a variation to this because this one is actually made with 26 gauge wire, weaving wire that is, and I'm going to be using 28 gauge. Also, I'm using a slightly different weave. I've done the basket weave on here. That's like what I demonstrated in my very first video. So you can alternate whichever weave you want with this necklace. And I'm going to take this opportunity to teach you a new weave of mine. It's called the 1, 2, 3. What I've used here is a 12 millimeter bead in the middle and 4 millimeter beads on the side and an 8 millimeter bead in the center on top. And I'm using the same measurements of beads but a little bit different. And another thing I like to point out is I don't like to do the exact same beads from the center to the side. I like to use either a flat bead or a gemstone bead in the middle. Today I'm using this cat eye bead in the middle, and then I'm going to use crystals on top here because it just gives it more interest. And my 1, 2, 3 weave, as you will see when I demonstrate, also has a variation in the weave that gives it also more interest. So we're going to start now with teaching you the 1, 2, 3 weave. So I have, as I've been practicing with my videos, I will have the list of supplies that you need in the description of the video. You can, of course, change the sizes and the length of your weave. If you do bigger beads, I really don't recommend a bigger center bead. You would need to do a longer weave. And if you do a smaller bead, you wouldn't have to weave as long. But we cut off the extra weave, so you might as well weave the full amount. Okay, so we're going to start with my technique of lassoing in the wire. So we're going to have a tail, a small tail, and the weaving wires on top. And again, this is 28 gauge. Okay, so I just have my first loop. Then I introduce the next wire underneath the weaving wire. Snug it in. And I'm going to introduce the last wire. Okay, so I call this the lassoing in, and it just holds the wires in so nicely. And I'm just going to straighten out this wire a little bit. Should have done that beforehand. Okay, that should be good. Okay, so with the 1, 2, 3, you take the wire and you're going underneath all 3, and then I exaggerate the bend like this, and what it does is it keeps the wire neat and the tension right. And then through the bottom 2 wires is step 1, and then up through the top 2 wires, whoops, and that's step 2, and then up through the bottom 2 wires, and that's step 3, and that's why I call it the 1, 2, 3. And then we go up and around. Step 1, I gotta look behind my camera. Step 2. There we go. Okay, so that's behind and around, and down 1, up through the top 2 wires, 2, up through the bottom 2 wires, 3. And at first I always cinch them up regularly, and I find with this weave, as it gets longer, you need to cinch it up every 3 or 4 patterns. If you wait till 5, then you're going to have issues with it not cinching up nice and neat. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more. Up and around. Notice how I pull over the wire with like this? That helps as well. Okay, now I'm going to show you a couple of other tricks that I do to, when I'm weaving. I try not to weave too far from the end, but and it's easy to slide it right now because I don't have very much here, but it gets really difficult to slide it. But we do some sliding, and I'm going to just show you how I do it. So when your work gets too close to the end, I take my pliers and I slide it. Right now it's really easy because there's only a little bit there. Okay, and I like to have the wire number 1, core wire number 1, the shortest, core wire number 2 in between, and the last core wire the longest. And it just helps organize your weave as you're going along. If you haven't been doing this and you try it, you'll be amazed how much it really helps you with your weaving. Okay, now how I over exaggerate my bends like this, what it does is I love this weave because it gives you a couple of options. And when you're over exaggerating that bend, it keeps the back super, super neat. And you can use the back for a totally different look. See, isn't that cool? I like how it shows it's got the long wrap, and then underneath it shows the mini wrap in between, and it looks really cool. Okay, so now I've got my other weaving done already, but I wanted to see, I've got a full length of it done here, but I'm going to show you another technique I use. Now for bending your wire or pulling your wire back, we bend it at the end because I have done this mistake where I've pulled it back and I pulled the whole wire through and my weaving was ruined. So this is a little trick that I do to prevent that. I just bend the ends like this, and it's like a stop. Whoops. There. And then I can pull the weave wire totally to the end, and it doesn't go through. And I grab the next one. And the last one. There. Okay, so once you're done that, these are kind of pokey, so you can snip them off. And that's only once we're done the full length of weave. So I'm going to move on to my next piece and do some more explaining there. Okay, so we're going to do 5 inches of weaving. Now this is the back. There, it's in focus. And isn't that neat? Especially when you show just a little bit of it, and you can really notice it, because that's the way you look at it in your pieces. It's a little bit at a time, and it always looks neater than the full piece. When you look at the full piece, it's not well, there. It's not quite as neat. That's the front. Okay, so this is how, I'm going to show it up close. This is why I like this weave for this pendant. It gives extra texture because it's tight on one side and loose on the other side. Okay, and you can see a little bit of imperfections, and what you can do to make your piece better is just put your nail in between and equal them out, and just be that little bit extra picky. But I usually don't do that until the piece is done. You know, being that fanatic, it's going to be just generally in line, and then sometimes your wires bunch up in places, and this is where you go like this, and we're not pushing hard, we're just gently doing it because we don't want to mar the weaving, and it just makes the weaving that much neater again. Okay, and when we make the piece, we're cutting off the end, so we don't have to be super picky, but if this end is poking you because we did those bends, just snip it off. Just snip it off. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we're going to leave this little tail here because we don't want it poking us either while we work. We'll clip it off later. We are bending a curve that's gonna be shaped around the bead. I'm talking slow because I'm concentrating on the curve. It's quite different working behind the camera. And I like to have, as you see here, I'm curving with the tight weave on the center part and the big weave on the outer part. And you see how when I'm bending it, it's equalizing the weave, and that makes it look just that much neater. Okay, so I'm going to reference to this one on a regular basis because we're using the same size of bead. So my curve is in good shape. It's almost identical. I didn't plan that, but it worked out well. And another way you can do it is putting the bead in there and seeing, is that shaping it enough? Do I have it on the side high enough? And again, we can reference to the other one. And it's fairly similar. Okay, you won't have the other one to look at, but I'm just trying to make a very similar one for you. Okay, so that part's good. Now the next part, I'm moving in slightly, so I'm going to shape it in like that. Of course, we can always adjust later too. This is very easy to adjust lots. Okay, and we're going to make a built-in bail with the weave. And it's part of the design element, but it's so nice. Okay, and then you got to decide exactly where you want it, and you got to decide how tall you want your bail. See the bail on this one's quite large. You can have yours smaller, but I think the large bail looks good with the larger bead. So I'm going to put it up here, I think. And we've got to make sure we have enough weave on top there to do it, and I believe we do. So we're going to put a bend here, and we're just going to use our fingers like this. And then we're going to, it's going to show off the inside beautiful weave there as well. And then we're going to make it wrap around about here. So we're going to go flip this through, and I'm holding it in place where, see, we'll have to adjust that again, but we know we got the length there to do it. So we're going to go like this. We're going to flip it around. See how I twisted it? And wrap it around like that. And then we're always adjusting. And one thing that's really nice about weave work is it's so adjust friendly is what I call it. It just likes to do it really nice. And I made an error in my weave, and it's showing up at the front. Right. Where is it? Oh, maybe it isn't. I did make one mistake in this length. And some people, your customers, will love that because they go, just means it's handmade. Now, I'm just gonna, my fingers are doing it, so I'm going to introduce a plier a little bit, very gently flatten this out. Okay, there we go. I think I got that. There. Then at the back, I'm going to snip it off right here, and I'm going to crimp it in against that weave over there. So you got to give yourself some bending space. So I'd say 5 millimeters, and snip the whole thing off like that. Okay, and now I'm taking my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to curl that under. And make it so that the end is touching the weave inside. That way there's no pokes anywhere to hurt somebody. Okay. There. Now I'm going to reshape this at the bottom. Sometimes you unbend it and bend it again, and my weave moved. So I'm just going to cinch it back up. There. Don't worry about taking your time to get that shape just right, because it's worth the effort. Okay, I'm going to compare it again. Very close. too bad. Okay. So now we're at a point where we can snip off this end. And we want to do it as close as possible, but we're going to have wire over top, so it's not going to poke anybody. So we don't need to crimp it in. And we're going to do the closest. Take this wire. And I'm going to do a curl, a little one there. And then I'm going to do a bigger one, and I'm going to start it with my nail like that. Put my finger over it, my thumb over it. Okay, see how I did that? And I like to hold it underneath, it supports it. And now I'm going to introduce the big bead. This is a 12mm bead. Okay, and we want to have the wire so it's going to sit fairly center, like this. Okay, and then we're going to take this wire, once we got it in that position, and it's springy, see, it springs out of shape. So we're going to go there, and I'm going to bend it, hold it into place, and I'm bending it against the weave. And then I'm taking the end and bending it up. And I'll take the pliers and pull it up the rest of the way. And I want to, like that. Okay. I'm going to crimp it down a little bit. Okay, now we want to measure it about 15mm from the end. And snip it off. Now this is just an approximation. You'd want it, if you're going to be off, be a little tiny bit shorter instead of longer. I think the maximum we'd want is 15, and I'm missing the mark here. There. And we're going to make a spiral, and we're going to go up this way. So I'm going to do my first little bend at the end. Whoops. Crimp it in as best you can. Sometimes you gotta work at it. There, I think I got it now. Once you got it going, then it's quick. And I'm going to lift it up so I don't so the weave gets out of my way a little bit. And then flatten it down, like so. And that holds the bead somewhat in place. Okay, flatten this out again. That's the first step with the beads. Next step, we're going to take these 2 wires and we're going to do 2 curls with it as well. The first one really won't look like a curl, it's just bending it, and I'm going to do finger against finger holding it in place. Careful of that wire at the end, it does get you a little bit. So just a tight curl there. And now we're going to do another curl, and we're going to do it a little bit bigger. And we want to spread the wires a little bit to give it more interest. There. That. Because we don't want them identical. Okay, and I'm going to take, we want them kind of crossing over. And this wire, just going to go around. We want to push this bead up a little bit, and this wire is going to hold that bead in place. Up there. So we're just going to do a wrap around like this. We want it to be the full size of the bead. Now I made my wires a little bit short. I have adjusted the measurements in yours to be longer. This is where I'm finding I'm short. I should have just enough, but I'd rather you have extra to play with. Okay. Now I'm going to take the end, bend it, pull it with my chain nose plier down snug, but yet still stretch it over the bead because it's going to tighten up on you. And we're going to wrap around the other wire and see how it's going to lock that bead in place. Bring it back up. I'm going to push it up. It's going to be tricky on me. There we go. While holding this wire in place, I'm going to snug it up. Just that around the bead. I'm usually much faster than this. The camera being the way really slows me down. Didn't realize it would do that. Okay, so I'm not going to cut any off here because I'm a little bit short, I would think. I would recommend that you would make it 15, measure it 15 millimeters long. I'm going to measure mine and see where I'm at. Oops, wrong side. With the curve, I'd say I'm about 12. Okay, and then I'm gonna cinch that up. I'm gonna make this a 2-part video so that the phone doesn't divide it up like it did to me in that other one. So as soon as I'm done this, I'm going to go to part 2. Make it a B. It's a tight space to work in, so you have to take your time and be careful. Yes, it's just a little bit short. There. Now, because it is short, I'm going to go like this. Change it up like that. And then I'm going to take this one. Thinking about this. I kind of like the way that's laying, but I don't like the way they look together. So I'm just, do I want to flip it? Let's flip it, see what it looks like. Lift it up. There. That does look better. Okay. So we're going to part B now. So I'll see you in a bit. And I will put a link for the next video in the top corner. I'll see you soon.